All right, so welcome to a thrilling Thursday. Thrilling because we are not just talking about burnout. We are talking about how to actually avoid your engine from stalling on the corporate highway. So I'm sitting here with a full tank now, but that wasn't always the case. I'm clear, calm, and I have a direction, but it wasn't always the case, which I mentioned. It started really well, and there were many redlining, overheating, and pretending the warning signs weren't flashing during my career. Burnout isn't just being tired, it's what actually happens when your internal engine is pushed past its limits day after day until something inside starts to smoke. So this is part 2 of our series, Corporate Burnout Drivers. So let's hit it with a recap. So I hope everyone is doing all right this morning. It is Thursday, so we are towards the end of the week. You've got, well, I suppose the rest of today to deal with. And then also tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday. Happy Friday for tomorrow. And then the weekend. So hopefully you do get to relax if you're not watching football. But yeah, so hopefully you're able to relax on the weekend, soak in some of these points. And just both from Tuesday's session and then also today's session. So there'll be more series coming out, more information, more tips. We're really here to help. So if you want more, do sign up for our community where you're going to be hearing more from our newsletters, things like that. So we do drop hints, tips, and other things out there. So let's get started. Okay, so with the recap, let's go for it. So burnout isn't just a vibe, it's a mood. It's a work-created symptom, so or syndrome. It is it has to have these three criteria, and they are very measurable criteria. It has to be associated with work as well, so it's not if you're dealing with these sorts of things outside of work, that, like, some of these strategies are going to help, but in terms of definition, is not necessarily called burnout, but the strategies are still applicable if you're feeling these things. So corporate burnout is certainly a factor, and it's becoming more and more these days. So at least 90% of us are feeling extreme stress, and 1 in 5 are taking time off work due to extreme stress and burnout reporting symptoms. So at least I believe it's over 70% of individuals in the corporate space are reporting burnout symptoms. So this is very relevant to today, and it's just to know that you're not alone. The first criteria for burnout is total exhaustion. I don't know if that's what you feel like every day, but you're not able to recover. Even sleep does not help you recover. So there's the physical, mental, emotional fatigue so deep you cannot recharge. Your tank is empty, and even rest doesn't refuel you. So you wake up tired. That's how I felt just last year. So the second one here is cynicism or negativity and detachment from work. So you pull away from colleagues and you resent tasks. You feel like you're watching your job from the outside. So there's this weird separation, like you're not actually there. You've got no attachment to work. And there is a bit of a disconnect there. So certainly felt this. It was a job that I once loved, and then all of a sudden I resented the tasks. I didn't want to hang out with colleagues because it was almost like a performance rather than actually enjoying the conversations there. So the third one is reduced performance. Your confidence drops, your output drops. You start doubting your skills, even the ones you've mastered. And here's the simplest way to understand burnout. You've got the feeders, the root causes, and then the symptoms, which is basically the fuel, the engine, and the smoke. So what's feeding the engine, right? And the engine needs maintenance. Otherwise, smoke is going to appear, and it's going to be black smoke, probably because of your oil. But smoke is never good, whether it's white or black. And I think the key thing here is with reduced performance, for me, it was like I couldn't necessarily recall things that I knew. So things I had learned, it was getting harder to recall those things. It was almost like a cloudy mind, and it was impacting my performance. So things that I'd be able to remember and cite technical references, things like that, like on the spot. I knew them, but they weren't coming. So if you're experiencing that, it's one of the criteria for burnout. So you could be reporting all these symptoms or feeling all these symptoms or only just one. So it's important to keep an eye out for these things. Most people only notice the smoke. So not necessarily the root causes and the feeders. But today we're going to go under the hood because burnout isn't solved by wiping away the smoke. It's solved by fixing the engine. So on Tuesday, we popped the hood and looked at the first root cause of burnout, which is chronic stress, the constant revving of the engine with no pit stops. And we explored 3 layers of solutions, the 3-layered solution model that we have here. The first is the coping mechanisms, the quick fixes that reduce the symptoms. This is in the moment relief. You're feeling that stress, you're feeling that complete burnout. What can you do in the moment? And you might have heard some of these before if you didn't even attend the Tuesday session, but it's things like breathing techniques, micro breaks, grounding exercises like sensory method exercises where you name 5 things that you can see, that 4 things that you can smell, 2 things that you can taste, or 3 things that you can taste, and so on. So those are all coping mechanisms. They are not for long-term relief. These are your emergency breaks. So they help you actually in the moment where you need it the most. The second layer of the solutions is the sustainable solutions. So these are the habits that reduce the feeders. They shrink the overwhelming tasks into subtasks, setting boundaries that protect your fuel tank. And these are your maintenance routines. So this is just dealing with fuel, the petrol station, things like that. They are dealing with those feeders that are fueling the engine. And then, of course, we've got the transformational habits. These are the game changers, the deeper shifts that reduce the root causes. So assertive statements, interrupting, automatic people pleasing, and these are the engine upgrades. So if you want that better engine, that 6-cylinder engine, this is the engine upgrade. So this is how you better yourself for the long-term resilience and sustainability. So here's the twist though. So we did talk about the first driver, but there are 2. And there's 2 root causes of burnout. So let me ask you something. Do you know what the second root cause is? It's the one most people never see coming. It's the one that drains your battery even when the car is parked. The one that keeps your engine humming at 3 a.m. It's chronic anxiety. So burnout isn't just a stress condition. It's a threat response condition. An anticipatory threat that what if, that what will they think? Am I good enough? That's anxiety. So these are the feeders. Let me go through the feeders for anxiety. The fear of failure, the fear of criticism, the fear of saying no without suffering consequences, and the fear of job loss. So Gallup, which is an HR organization, it's got many HR representatives across many organizations around the world, found that the workers who are experiencing daily worry and fear, these anxiety markers, have 2.3 times higher burnout risk. This is the burnout pathway that anxiety creates. So how does it work? First, there's the emotional exhaustion. When you're constantly worried about your job security, performance, or being behind, you might your mind never switches off. You overthink, you're constantly replaying conversations, and you rehearse future meetings. Even when you're not working, your nervous system is. Your engine is running in the garage, burning fuel with nowhere to go. The second is the cynicism and attachment. So the negativity towards your work. Because anxiety makes you suspicious, skeptical. You start reading between the lines, assuming the worst, doubting intentions. Trust erodes and you pull back to protect yourself. Relationships feel heavier. The workplace feels colder. You're disconnected from the mission, the team, and the meaning behind all the work. This is the detachment. And then the third is the reduced sense of effectiveness or performance, the sense of success. So when your brain is overloaded with worry, your clarity drops. Decision-making becomes harder and confidence dips. Every task feels bigger than it is. You start believing that you're underperforming even when you're not. You don't feel successful. Put all of that together, the exhaustion, the detachment, the self-doubt, and you have the full burnout engine, not just one part of it. So the real question becomes then, what are we going to do about it? So how do we stop anxiety from hijacking the wheel? How do we stop the engine from overheating before the smoke appears? How do we build habits that keep us steady, even when it gets rough? So let me get to the solutions, the actual model. First, as we've done before in Tuesday session, we've got the coping mechanisms. These are for in the moment. The second is the sustainable solutions. This is the midterm. This is going to help you get a better handle on things and also avoid the burnout. But for true transformation and resilience, it's those transformational habits. These are the ones that make it truly sustainable in the long term. So first, let's talk about the coping mechanisms, the in-the-moment relief. So this is your toolbox because it can depend on the day and the situation. The quick stabilizers that stop anxiety from hijacking your nervous system. They won't fix the deeper drivers, but they will help you think clearly, regulate your emotions, and prevent burnout from escalating. So let's break it down by the most common anxiety triggers. So what are the most common anxiety triggers? For you, is it the fear of job loss or falling behind? Because this is certainly a common one. Have you felt this before? It can be overwhelming and it can influence everything in terms of how you show up, what you're thinking, all of your overthinking that can happen when talking about a particular meeting. So this fear makes you overthink, over-prepare, and overwork, like driving with your foot glued to the accelerator. Coping tools. So some of the coping tools you can use today. First is a reality check. So you can have prompts like, what evidence supports this fear? What evidence contradicts it? This interrupts the catastrophic thinking and brings your brain back to the facts. So it's not always giving the worst case scenario the highest probability. Actually make it more realistic. Have you ever found that you weigh the worst case scenario much greater than the best case scenario, but you've got no support for it? You also weigh it more than the middle ground in terms of what's more realistic to actually happen. So this can happen. This is anxiety that's talking. The next one is task triage. One priority, one quick win, one boundary. So this reduces overwhelm and gives your brain a sense of control. So just do a quick win, and that can be setting a boundary. That can be just doing the highest priority item, just keeping that momentum and keeping it from overwhelm. So it's about reducing that overwhelm by task triage. What is the most important thing in this moment, and only focusing on that next step. Breaking it down into one step at a time, whether it's scheduling a meeting, having a discussion with someone, doing a particular admin task, that is the first step. So reduce that overwhelm will reduce the anxiety. The second most common fear, do you know what that is? Well, it's perfectionism and fear of making mistakes. So certainly in a male-dominated industry, in the corporate sector, I felt that I had to be perfect in order to get ahead. So, it was based on assumptions and observations that I saw, but it wasn't necessarily based on fact. And that limiting belief then impacted my thoughts and my behaviors, always just trying to be perfect with things. So this is anxiety. I don't know if you've experienced perfectionism before, or have those sorts of traits, or have been in fear of making a mistake, because at the end of the year, it's the mistake they remember. Even though you've done all of these great things, it's that one mistake that people bring up. And a seemingly small mistake turns out to be the thing that gets talked about the most. So it's blown up out of proportion. And in order to avoid this, you then try and be perfect with everything. So it can happen in the corporate world, but there are strategies around this. And particularly for that instance where you've got that end of year evaluation, look at our Clarity Under Pressure series where we do talk about that. There's more strategies, especially in that first module, communication influence, that will help you with this. But in the meantime, let's talk about what are some of the sustainable solutions. This is a sneak peek. As I said, there's more in the Clarity Under Pressure series, but this, for the perfectionism, it is your anxiety, and it keeps you polishing the task until you're mentally exhausted, and you've got no time. And then you create more overwhelm because you spent too long on that one particular task. I don't know if you've done that before, but I certainly have. So coping tools that you can use today include the good enough reframe. So ask, is 70% good enough for today? And most of the time it is. Most of the time, done is better than just making it perfect. So most tasks don't need 100%. So understand which tasks need to have more high quality and more effort than others. This stops the spiral of over polishing. And then you've got the time boxing. Set a timer and stop it when it rings. This forces completion and breaks the paralysis. So once again, you don't overspend time on one particular task and then create overwhelm by everything else piling up behind. So that is certainly a practical strategy that I have used. And that timer, you might just wrap up a minute or two afterwards, but it then helps you move on to the next task. So the third one there, the third most common fear in the corporate sector. So what do you think that is? Any thoughts? It's people dynamics. And of course, it's a complex world out there. And none of it, in corporate, we're not taught psychology. And yet it's such an important factor that we have to deal with each day, because it can create the skepticism, the distrust, the fear of judgment. These people dynamics is a complex sector. So this creates hypervigilance, second guessing every comment, every tone, every email. It can impact how we feel and create anxiety. So if you've ever I suppose had someone speak in a different tone to you, it's, oh, they're mad at me or something like that, even though they might not be. They might be stressed about something else, but it can create that anxiety and create that interpretation. Our thoughts, our interpretation, our narrative behind that tone can be and have a huge impact on how we act. So what coping mechanisms can we use today to deal with that? And once again, our module 2 of Clarity Under Pressure series talks about more in depth in this. It's all about emotional intelligence, how we read other people, how we put narratives behind the stories or behind the situations. That is so important. But today we're going to talk about perspective taking. So what's another possible explanation? This stops your brain from assuming the worst. So once again, it's that catastrophic feeling that builds this anxiety, this overwhelm inside of us. Another thing that can help is the regulation breaks before hard conversations. So just 30 seconds of breathing. It calms your nervous system, a grounding or even movement, going for a walk. So we spoke about those coping mechanisms earlier. This is when you can use them right before a difficult meeting. So it calms the nervous system. You go in calm. This resets the nervous system so you enter the conversation steady and not reactive. So these coping mechanisms don't solve long-term drivers of anxiety, but they do help you regulate your nervous system right now. So they help you think clearly, more grounded decisions are made, and you stop the slide into burnout. They're the first line of defense while you build your sustainable habits and transformational changes, which are coming up next. So let's move into it. So the sustainable solutions. So we spoke about the coping mechanisms help you stabilize in the moment, but sustainable solutions help you change the conditions that create anxiety in the first place. So these are, think of coping mechanisms as your emergency brakes and sustainable solutions as your better driving habits. The ones that prevent the skid, the ones that prevent you from having to use the emergency brake. So don't even get into that situation. And these, let's sort of build on the 3 anxiety triggers that we just covered. So the first one is that fear of job loss, the fear of falling behind. And for that, we can clarify expectations. Because the fear of falling behind comes from not knowing what actually matters. Ambiguity is anxiety's favorite fuel. Sustainable tools you can use this week include the weekly priority reset. So a 10-minute ritual where you look at your top 3 outcomes for the week. Regular management alignment is also an important factor here. A quick check-in is important. It's so powerful to have that quick check-in. So are these still priorities? Is a quick question that can reduce the fear of something being missed, or you focusing on something that's no longer a priority. So you can ask the simple success questions, like what does success look like for this? This replaces the thinking with clarity. This replaces overthinking with clarity. And these habits reduce that anxiety loop. So if you're caught in that cycle of just always having that anxiety weight on you, this will help. And then you can say, if I don't do everything, I'll lose everything. So that's never the case. It's just focus on the priority items, doing that reset, having those check-ins. That is going to be a regular habit that will reduce overwhelm, that will help you focus on what's actually going to move the needle. And once again, we speak about focus with intention in our Clarity Under Pressure series. That's module 4, is focus with intention. And this is where this is even expanded upon with more strategies behind it, more phrases that you can use in order to actually get that focus that you need. So the next one for sustainable solutions, of course, is the boundaries that actually hold. So this is when you've got people that create this toxic environment. It can create anxiety. So people that don't respect those boundaries. You've got fear of judgment, fear of distrust, and you also have it basically creates hypervigilance, often coming from being too accessible and too reactive. So if you're always on, that is a problem because people will then always expect you to be on. But recently I've changed and I've set boundaries, and people actually change their expectations. So it will come. You just have to be you just have to stick with those boundaries and not necessarily be fear of if I create this boundary, I'm going to have consequences. So push past that fear because that fear is your anxiety talking. So boundaries isn't just about time, it's about the emotional boundary side. It's about emotional protection. So sustainable tools that you can use today. First is the daily focus blocks. So protect your 1 or 2 hours of interrupted work. So I think in previous socials, I have mentioned that we've got 2 hours of optimal time of focus each day. This is what you need to protect. And so to use focus blocks is very important, and protect those is also very important. So no Slack, no email, no pings, no notifications, which then brings me up to another thing: turn off those unnecessary notifications. So during a commute or after a set time, just turn those off. This breaks the always on anxiety cycle and pressure to respond, because when your phone pings, there's at least 10 seconds where your nervous system spikes. And so if you turn off those notifications, turn off those pings, you'll avoid the nervous system spikes. And you'll have more energy, feel lighter, it'll all be feeling better. So these boundaries reduce the social pressure that keeps your nervous system in fight or flight. The third sustainable solution is the structured constraints. So this is for your perfectionism and fear of making mistakes. And for this one, perfectionism is one of the biggest anxiety feeders. Do you believe that? That is, I can believe it, because it's about the fear of making mistakes. And it, as I mentioned, it can create that overwhelm with buildup of other tasks, and you might be perfecting a task that doesn't necessarily need to be as important as you're making it. So coping tools help you in the moment, but sustainable constraints retrieve train your brain long term. Sustainable tools that you can use this week for this include sharing drafts earlier, getting that feedback, and being able to implement it before you over polish, because sometimes if you wait till the end, the person has completely different feedback where you're basically rewriting it. And then it's a whole other piece of effort. But if you share an early draft, make sure that you're on the same page, it's easier. And you bring the other person along with the journey. So it's actually part of our communication and influence element within clarity under pressure, because that is managing stakeholders. And so this reduces rumination and the fear of criticism. So you practice done is better than perfect. And sometimes you've got to know which tasks just need to get done versus those that actually need a bit more effort and high quality. Are you absorbing all this? Don't worry, there is a summary at the end, so don't panic if you're trying to take notes with all of these little points. Also, our Clarity Under Pressure series goes over this in much more detail and provides more reflection exercises and takes you along that path. So this is a snippet, a sneak peek of what we sort of cover within Thrive Space and some of the tools, strategies that you'll be able to pick up along the way. So what we've got here is focus on just done is better than perfect, especially for those low risk tasks. Build that tolerance for imperfection. So I did this after my first year of manager. I stepped back, let things not necessarily be perfect, but then focus on managing my stakeholders, keeping them updated. And then also there's other ways to showcase your knowledge, showcase your skill, rather than necessarily being making a perfect document. So don't worry about that judgment, because you can tackle it in other ways. By doing this, in terms of allowing yourself to not necessarily be perfect, this rewires your nervous system to stop equating perfect with safe. These constraints make your work process lighter, faster, and less emotionally loaded. These sustainable solutions don't flip your life overnight, but they steadily lower the pressure that keeps your nervous system stuck in that chronic anxiety. They bridge between the coping mechanisms and the transformational changes. So these are the medium-term items that you can pick up that are actually going to make a difference. They're not necessarily the full solution. We'll get to that in a sec. Or we'll drop some hints with that in a sec. But they certainly will help you in the midterm. They are how you stop reaching reacting to the storm and start driving through it with clarity and control. So the last one, transformational habits. So these are the actual life changers. Coping mechanisms steady you in the moment. Sustainable solutions reduce the daily pressure. But transformational habits are the identity level shifts that change the entire way you experience work, anxiety, stress, all of that. So this is where burnout prevention becomes self-sustaining. Let's build on the same 3 anxiety triggers, but now at the deepest level. So give me a second here as we move to what's actually going to change. So the first one is rewriting internal narratives. This is in relation to that fear of job loss, fear of falling behind. Coping tools calm the fear. Sustainable habits reduce the ambiguity. But transformational habits or transformational changes happens when you rewrite the story that fuels the fear. So what's triggering that belief that is making you so fearful? That is what transforms your life. So because anxiety isn't just being triggered by the workload, it's being triggered by the beliefs underneath it. So we're going a bit over at the moment. So we are over delivering for you. If you stay with me for these transformational changes, it can make a huge difference to your life. So please do stay with me. These, but I will go quickly. And like I said, there is a summary towards the end. We've got the transformational reframes. I am behind, and you switch that to I'm progressing at a sustainable pace. It goes from I can't say no to boundaries protect my performance. And if I don't do anything, I lose everything, to I focus on what matters most. So productivity isn't about doing the most, it's about doing the most important. What's actually going to move the needle. That 80-20 rule, 20% of the activities makes 80% of the difference. So the narrative shifts change how we show up in every meeting, every project, and every decision. They're not just thoughts, they are actually a new operating system. So it's retraining our brain as to how we actually think. What do we tell ourselves? That inner voice. And you can learn about more of this in our Clarity Under Pressure series, actually how to do this. But these are a few tips as to what you can potentially do here. The next element here is practicing self-trust and self-compassion. Well, you might say, okay, well, how do I have more self-trust? Self-trust is keeping your small commitments. So when you say something, do it, right? Don't just give the talk. Don't be a hypocrite. Actually follow through. So you build self-trust and self-confidence with follow-through. Just your word is your law. So this is for perfectionism and the fear of making mistakes. So coping tools interrupt perfectionism. Sustainable constraints, they reduce the pressure. But transformational habits, they rebuild the relationship you have with yourself. Perfectionism thrives on self-doubt, whereas transformation thrives on self-trust. Transformation practices that you can put in place includes celebrating the small wins. So follow through on those small things and then celebrate them, just not the big win, not just the big wins. So for me, I would hold off celebrations to something big, but then of course I felt like I was never getting there. And it's really about bringing that forward, giving yourself I suppose a pat on the back for actually doing those small things, building that self-trust, building that self-confidence. And you can do that each day. If you achieve your 3 intentional items for that day, that will help build the confidence and trust. And you can acknowledge effort, not just results. So if you acknowledge effort and intention, your intention was there, you just didn't get the outcome, that is okay. You still made the right thing. You still made the right decision. So this creates internal safety, which is the opposite of anxiety. So you start to trust yourself, and mistakes stop feeling like threats. They become data points, not danger. So that's how you can overcome that. The last one for transformational habits is building a supportive community. So this relates to that people dynamics I felt when I was having to deal with a lot of toxicity at work. I reached out to an old friend who I hadn't seen in years, but I knew was a good person who was supportive, things like that. So having the right people surrounding you is so important in order for you to deal with these anxiety creating situations. So coping tools that help you regulate in the moment. We've got sustainable boundaries that reduce the emotional load, but of course, transformational habits change the environment you operate in because you're surrounded by the right people. And believe it or not, so I don't know if you know this, but isolation is one of the biggest drivers of corporate anxiety. And I don't know if you know, but the US General Surgeon also, I think a couple of years ago, said that there was an epidemic of loneliness, of isolation. So certainly it's something that can have a knock-on effect. So don't necessarily isolate, even though you try and isolate to control what you could control. And it's an automatic response, or it's a natural response to do, but it can be one of the worst things because it can perpetuate the situation. It can perpetuate the anxiety. It can be more in our head, and it can actually make matters worse. So certainly do reach out for support. We do have a community like Thrive Space that can also help. And surround yourself with people that regulate you, not drain you, so that are supportive, encouraging, and can have that real talk with you. So you don't necessarily want all yes people who can't necessarily relate, but you can also not necessarily want to be around the toxicity as well. So it's just finding that support is important. This shifts you from navigating the storm alone to you've got the crew with you. So this is powerful. Can you see how powerful this is? To not just navigate these things alone. It absolutely changes everything. So I did say that we've got a summary here for you. And if I go here, and I know we're over, but I'll do this quickly here. We've got the fear of job loss and falling behind. So we've got the coping mechanisms there. These are key in terms of the reality check prompts, the triage that we spoke about. We've got the sustainable solutions, which is the weekly priority reset, and transformational habits, which is those thoughts, reframing those thoughts. We then have the perfectionism and fear of making mistakes. You've got the coping mechanisms, which is the time boxing and that sort of thing, or you're 70% there, that's good enough for this task. Sustainable solutions, which are more the shared drafts earlier, and done is better than perfect. And transformational habits is really celebrating the small wins, changing how we talk to ourselves. The people dynamics, the coping mechanisms there, they include the perspective taking. The sustainable habits or sustainable solutions are more like the focus blocks and turning off those notifications. And the transformational habits are joining a community like Thrive Space, surrounding yourself with the right people. So very important for actually making long-term change and avoiding burnout, I should say. So in all of, I suppose, if we go to the next slide here, as I said, our solution here at Thrive Space is about coping mechanisms. They steady you in the moment. They help regulate your nervous system when anxiety spikes or even stress spikes, because we spoke about stress on Tuesday. They stop the spiral, and your engine is better for it. But it's not a sustainable solution. So your sustainable solutions reduce the triggers. They clean up the daily pressure. They avoid those situations where you're going to need those coping mechanisms. so your system isn't overheating. And then transformational habits. These change how you relate to work and yourself. They rewrite the internal narrative. They rebuild self-trust and reconnect you with others who know what it's like. So the Thrive Space model is relief, stability, and then transformation. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Has it been powerful for you today? I know I rushed through it all. We will, I suppose, re-emphasize these points a bit later in our socials, of course, because they are so important and they will help people. The feeders are the fuel. For burnout, these are the fears, the pressures, the perfectionism loops. You've got the root causes, which are your engine, the chronic stress or the chronic anxiety. We've spoken about both on these 2 live streams. We then have the symptoms, which is the smoke. So the exhaustion, the detachment, the reduced performance. And we are going to say that most people just wipe away the smoke, and you've learned how to fix the engine. There's more to this. The burnout is, to avoid burnout. Thrive Space model is covered more in depth, and this elements here in our Clarity Under Pressure series. So we also have an AI simulation to practice. If you have to go into difficult meetings, if you've got those priority conflicts, you can practice those sorts of habits and new ways of working. So do you want to hold yourself back by not investing in yourself today? So what would your workload or what would your workday look like without the weight of burnout symptoms? How many more years would you want to be carrying this load? Do you want the freedom from that emotional weight? The promotion, for instance, you can have while maintaining another work-life balance. When we lose money, we can earn it back. But when we lose time, there's no getting it back. So how do you want 2026 to count? We're halfway through 2026, if you can believe it or not. I can't believe it's July already. I don't know where the time's gone. But what is 2026 looking like compared to 2025? Is it looking the same? Are you wanting it to be different? Are you wanting the outcome, the results to be different? So Warren Buffett, a renowned businessman, very successful. His famous quote is, "Invest in yourself is the best investment you'll ever make. It'll pay off for the rest of your life." That's Warren Buffett that said that. So what can you do to invest in yourself today? And I know that you've got to run, but before you go, just know this, that the Clarity Under Pressure alleviates the sources of burnout and helps you go from merely surviving the workday to thriving each day. I had to speak fast because there was a lot that I wanted to drop here today, but this is only like a snippet of what we actually provide to you through the Clarity Under Pressure series. That is a huge game changer for you. And we've got an exclusive discount, which I wanted to give you today and rush through it. So if you made it to the end here, you have an exclusive discount compared to those that had to leave. So do use that discount if you would like to take advantage of that. That is gone at the end of Sunday, so Sunday at midnight. That is absolutely gone. So take advantage of it today and do change your life. You do have the ability to do that. The time is now. Don't lose this moment. And thank you for joining today. I suppose please sign up for the community if you want to hear more about these strategies. There's more practical tips. I don't speak this fast on don't always speak this fast, but I do try and drop as much as I can because I do want to help you. And also check out our Clarity Under Pressure series. Like I said, there is a discount, generous discount for those exclusive individuals who have joined us on this live stream and have made it to the end. It's only for you. So it's burnout. Burnout Driver is the discount code, and type in when you purchase the Clarity Under Pressure, and you'll be able to get a 40% discount. So I hope you enjoy today. Definitely the thing that I suppose captures me the most is control your destiny or someone else will. So if you don't start making decisions for your life, you'll just be absorbed by everyone else's priorities. So control your destiny or someone else will. The choice is yours. Thank you for joining today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I did speak really quickly, but we will be dropping more of these tips and strategies within our community. So please do join the community, and I'll see you on our next live stream. Cheers. Bye.